Kathy was talking about with Schumacher's work, and then move forward to this evening where Florian Schultz, who I think is on a plane right now from Minneapolis, will be presenting his To the Arctic project. And both of those photographers, Blue Earth Photographer projects, worked to publish books through Helen, the Mountaineers. And I think those have been some of the most visible and effective projects that Blue Earth has had. And one of the reasons is because of what you have put together with your whole ecosystem and chain of people. And what I wanted to do with this panel was to go behind the scenes a little bit and get you guys to explain, how did you do this? What does it take to make one of these projects that clearly we have all this photographer passion for and reason for creating, but you built something much, much, much bigger than that. And so I want to hear that story. So we have Helen, the publisher of Mountaineers Books, Dan Ritzman from the Serapha, who's been a partner with a lot of these, and then Gary Hockey, who is a board member of Blue Earth and a printer. So he knows the book side of this. And so I'm going to let each of these guys tell you more about what they do, and then we'll figure out how this is all going to pass. So, Helen?
Okay, great. Can you hear me all right? Okay. I just want to say a few words about what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. And all of us want to leave a lot of time for questions and comments from you. We would like to learn from you. Our work with Mountaineers Books, Braided River in print really started with Schumacher. It was a departure of us, for us of sorts. We really see the work that photographers do as creating a kind of a visual metaphor. And we like to work with the photographers to create a theme or a brand or tell a story around that. And so the work that we bring to it as a publisher is really to help to start with that photographer's vision, but then to enrich that through story and to create a brand. For us, books are just the beginning of the story, and that's really the departure for the Braided River brand. The books, in a way, are a Trojan horse. If we have a book that's been published, it's a reason to gain publicity. If we do an event with a photographer in a city, at a university, at a function, it's a way to gain publicity. We might end up selling 20 books. We might end up talking to a crowd of 200 people. But because of that book and because of that event, we're able to gain media attention, and we can leverage that into 200,000 connections, 2 million connections. So the book really is just the beginning, and it's all of these other things that are connected to it that are really important for us to make our message more powerful. Collaboration is absolutely essential for us, and it has been since the very beginning. One of the most important things that we do is our collaboration with environmental groups. We are not an advocacy organization, and we don't understand the inner workings of how politics and advocacy works. If our work did not have this component to it, there would really be no purpose to it. We've learned so much from these partnerships. We don't want to get into that business, but we want to partner with people who really understand it and do it well. And it's through these relationships that we're able to extend the importance of our work. Book sales alone would never fund these projects. It would never help us to fund the photographers' field work for these projects. So the funding community is huge in this. The funding community has also been great in terms of partnering with us at the very beginning of a project to talk about what the issues are, who are the people that are on the ground that are doing the most important, impactful work, and how can we craft this message together in a way to make it meaningful and to create change, which is really the basis of all of this. We also have formed some really amazing collaborations with outside organizations like the Burke Museum. We have 5 exhibits that were created based on our books that are traveling around the country. We're working with McGilvery Freeman Films now with Florian Schultz's project, we have the official companion book to an IMAX film, which is a very, very interesting collaboration, one that allows us to really take a look at what we're able to do in terms of serving our mission about extending this message beyond the environmental community in ways that we can engage more people, different demographics. We're creating websites, we're creating ebooks, we're doing videos, we're doing exhibits. Once again, the book is just the kind of the foundation for that. Some things that we're really proud of, I'll just give you a short list. We did a collaboration with Amy Gulick and our book Salmon in the Trees on the Tongass Rainforest. We did a collaboration with the Forest Service and several environmental groups in Southeast Alaska. And if you had asked me 2 years ago what the chances were of working with the Forest Service on a project like this, I would have said really would be a dream, but I'm not really sure that that's going to be possible. It's something that we're really proud of, involving the local communities and involving the people in government that are working on establishing the legislation and what's going to happen with these lands. I'm proud that President Obama has a copy of Yellowstone to Yukon, Freedom to Roam. We've heard many stories over the years of getting these materials into the hands of important decision makers and how visual images do really make a difference in telling our story. As you know, with Shabonker, having our book Seasons of Life and Land held up on the Senate floor and defeating a bill on oil drilling is probably one of our greatest moments. And that couldn't have been done without Shabonker Banerjee and all of the collaborations with the conservation groups. Alaska Wilderness League made that opportunity possible for us. We're doing a book on the Western Arctic called On Arctic Ground, and working with the Sierra Club and other organizations who have purchased thousands of copies of this book, and we'll be using that this spring to do what we can to prevent oil drilling, which is looking like it's rather imminent. And we just learned this morning that we're going to have the opportunity to do an exhibit of Florian Schultz's images for a week starting May 14th in the Capitol Rotunda. And this will be on the Western Arctic. So this is a great honor for us. So I think that in many ways, what I see our role in this great collaboration as creating these brands, creating the stories, creating these cohesive messages that connect with people. And two of the ones that I'm most proud of are the Freedom to Roam. That was a brand that really resonated to such an extent that it's now an organization under the World Wildlife Fund that's working on wildlife corridors. And the other one, the other brand, the other theme I'm really proud of is Salmon in the Trees. It was a very unusual, evocative title that told the story of this ecosystem in a way that intrigued people in the lower 48 to want to learn more, as well as gave a great amount of pride to the people up in Alaska. So that message has been one that tells the story and tells it in a very positive and hopeful way. One of my pragmatic friends keeps reminding me that hope is not a strategy, but it's something that I really feel core to our work, and I think that the work that many of you are doing gives me hope, so I thank you.
I guess that means I'm next. So, again, my name is Dan Ritzman. I'm the Deputy Director of the Sierra Club's Resilient Habitats Campaign and also the Director of our Alaska programs. And I've spent a good chunk of my life defending Arctic and wild Alaska, and have worked a lot with Helen and the Braided River publishing on these books. But I just wanted to maybe first give a little bit of a history, because as the Sierra Club we like to talk about history. We're the country's oldest conservation group. We're 116 years old now, and our history goes back a long ways, working with conservation photographers and using images to promote conservation. I think a lot of that is because what we do is engage people, get them excited, and get them plugged into the political process to gain these victories. And a big part of these places are places where people don't often have the opportunity to travel to. And so I think using these images has been important to share with folks around the country. So a lot of people think about Ansel Adams and maybe that he was sort of the first of these photographers, but really it goes back to a gentleman named Herbert Gleason, who was an ordained minister back in the 1800s. And then right around the turn of the century, he quit the ministry and he started traveling around taking photographs in the Northeast and out west because he loved those landscapes, and he became friends with John Muir, and they started to use his pictures to advocate for these special places, including Hetch Hetchy, which is the other Yosemite Valley that was eventually flooded for water for San Francisco. But his pictures were part of the campaign to protect that area. And then sort of moving forward a couple decades, you do have Ansel Adams showing up on the scene, a young Ansel Adams who had a passion for both art and nature, and he found a way to combine those two passions in book publishing. He published his first book, I think, in 1931 on the Taos Pueblo. He had his first solo exhibit at the Smithsonian in the early 1930s. But really it was 1938, he published a book called The John Muir Trail, High Sierras, or High Sierras John Muir Trail, a limited edition book that solely was for conservation efforts, that gave these books to members of Congress. The Sierra Club was trying to pass legislation that would protect Sequoia and Kings Canyon National Park. Those books were instrumental in making that happen. There's still some of them out there today. I think they sell for like $50,000, so there's still hope for a shit. And then we get David Brower, who came on to the Sierra Club as our executive director in the 60s, 1950s. And he really saw the value in these books, to use them for conservation purposes. He published a book in 1958 called This is Echo Park, and it was, at that time, the Bureau of Reclamation was trying to dam the Green River in a place called Echo Park, and this became the sort of birth of the modern environmental movement. It really tied all the aspects together with media and grassroots and these book publications. So this is a seminal moment for the club, and I think for the use of publication. David Brower went on to start to publish these series of coffee table books. The Sierra Club became famous for these coffee table books starting in the 60s, and they were used, again, to help pass legislation. So they helped pass the Wilderness Bill in '64. They were used around the passage of the Alaska National Interest Lands Conservation Act, or NILCA. So that was a kind of the heyday, I think, of the Sierra Club and our use of these big, beautiful coffee table books. I think I came on the scene sort of in the early, late 80s, early 90s. I like to think of that as sort of the slideshow era of conservation. I think there was a lot fewer books being published and used, but there were tons of photographers out on the road showing slideshows of their images of these special places and getting people engaged in this process that way. And then in the 2000s, we saw the Blue Earth Network and Braided River come back on the scene, and really this birth of publication again, and the opportunity to use these books and images to gain conservation victories. And that's what we're doing now. We're partnering with Braided River. We've worked with the books Helen mentioned, the Salmon in the Trees and the Arctic book. We're working with this On Arctic Ground. And now I think it's really exciting and challenging because we still want to do the same thing. We want to introduce people to these special places that they may not be able to travel to, but we need them to experience them through these amazing images. We need to get them engaged, and then we need to point them towards the decision makers to gain these conservation victories. I think it's a little harder now in the kind of modern media world, and that's one of the challenges that we face. But we also have a lot more great tools in the arsenal. We have the books. Helen mentioned the museum exhibits, so we partner a lot when they open up in these museums to get our members and activists to those places. We have opportunity to do multimedia stuff on our web pages, so the Sierra Club will be having a slideshow up on our webpage of the To the Arctic and On Arctic Ground images starting this month. So again, just creative ways to tie people in, but I think it really is the challenge that I face, that the conservation community faces now, is using these amazing images and these great tools. How do we get them out to people in the kind of the best way possible to get as many people engaged as we can? So I think that's hopefully as we have these conversations, sort of where it goes.
I'm really kind of here as a support role, but I'm a great believer in books. I have a passion for books, specifically the kind of coffee table books that we do. And I think we all have books, and we all love books. The books that are on our coffee tables say a lot about us. And the thing that's still so important about these types of books, yes, they're very difficult to do. They take sometimes large teams of people. They take trucks. They take all kinds of things. But that physicality screams, this is important, pay attention. And it allows people to have a focus on your subject matter that is different, I think, and becoming more important in the media landscape that we live in today. So,
Can you just explain a little bit about what you do with Advocacy and your project?
we basically manufacture books. I wish more of our books were. I wish more of our books were of this nature. But the commercial landscape that we're in for this type of book is growing very rapidly, actually. With all the things that we hear about the changes in the book industry, a lot of it is true, but it doesn't necessarily relate to this type of book. It's more the novels that are going to ebooks. And we're expanding into ebooks and things like that too, but the physicality, last year we did a book, it was a cookbook, but it weighed 50 pounds. So people are, we are concentrated very heavily on making a sustainable product, which is different than the junk mail and everything else that gets tossed about. I mean, these are built to last. And that legacy of a project like this, we feel still has a huge impact because books can be passed down. When people buy a book, it's not just the focus on that. The attention span is not a short attention span. It could be a very long attention span. And so that to us is the beauty and the importance of what we do.
Awesome. You can hold on to that. Actually, my question is for you, Helen. So it's a chicken or egg question. So what comes first in these sorts of projects? Is it a cause? Is it a driver with the body of work? Is it a funder or somebody else with an agenda? How does this work?
All of those, honestly. There is no formula, and I think that is what makes it exciting for me, because each one of our projects, and I call them projects rather than books, they aren't the same. We can't use a cookie cutter approach. They've come to us in different ways. Many of them have come to us with a photographer with a vision fully formed. Those have been exciting. They're a little bit more challenging because we have found that if we can go into a project with a little bit more of an open mind about how it will evolve and involve the partners in earlier, and by partners I mean the conservation organizations, the suppliers, the funders, the various constituencies, to really talk about it in terms of what are our goals with this? What are we trying to achieve? We're not just trying to create a celebration of landscape. Those have been done. And they don't have the kind of impact that we're looking for. So how can we identify the goals and create something that's really based upon the individual attributes of each one of the projects? So it can be from all of those components. And I don't think there's any one right way, but I do know that it does tend to work better if it's conceived a little bit more universally rather than starting with a fully formed visual project.
But books are at the core of all this, right? I mean, you could have a topic or work with someone to just do an exhibit of something, right? That's a platform that you use. And you mentioned a little bit about this, but I want to hear more about why you put the book at the core of this whole thing?
Well, I think that probably it's because I come from the community of the book, and as Gary was talking about that community of the book, I believe that this format is incredibly powerful. It's been a technology that's been around for centuries, and it's one that I think provides that platform for other things to spring from. It's not to say that we couldn't start with a website or with an exhibit, but there's something about that permanent record of a book that really is a permanent statement. The exhibits will come and they'll go. The websites will be up for a while, maybe they'll be around for a long time, it's hard to say, but this really is a kind of an artistic permanent record. So it does, we call it providing the foundation for other things to come from. And we find that the book provides a very rich experience in terms of developing those visual properties, developing the stories, involving artists and map makers and writers, so that you're creating this community that is manifesting itself in a book that then can be leveraged in different ways. It just seems to be the most fundamental way for us to grow.
I want to talk a little bit about partners, and clearly partners are a huge source of strength. But there's a Coca-Cola logo on the back of that, to the Arctic, which I was surprised to see, but at the same time, that's an exciting opportunity. How do you maintain control of your vision for these projects when you have so many other organizations with agendas, for better or for worse?
It is definitely challenging. And I spend probably a good part of my day managing those relationships. As rich as these things can be, they're also very complicated, sometimes frustrating. And for me, the way that it seems to work best is if you can start with some foundational goals that you all agree on. So that's something that you can all reflect back on. So what happens often is with partnerships, it doesn't become about the overall vision, it becomes about, well, what's my part in it? How do I look? Where's my billing? You know, how big is my name going to be? And those things are important. That kind of recognition is important. But all of the partners in this venture all have to agree that there is this overall vision and goal. If it is to protect the coastal plain of the Arctic Refuge, that's what we always come back to. You know, if there's an argument or any kind of a decision that needs to be made, we have some clearly identified goals that we can refer back to. And if it doesn't pass that test, then it doesn't belong in the equation.
So, both you, Dan and Helen, so how do you measure success with something like this? Is it sales? Is it eyeballs? Is it some sort of conservation goal met?
It's a very good question. And there's a lot of different ways that we measure success. When we have our projects funded by outside donors, they ask us to identify metrics before they provide funding, and we need to report back on those. Those metrics can be things that make sense to us or not. And it's a little bit of a conundrum. For example, if quantity is really what is being measured, then that's what we perform to. And sometimes quality, it doesn't get compromised, but I think that it gets shortchanged. And I'll give you an example of that. If we do an event, I mean, everybody loves to hear that you just did an event and you had 800 people show up. But what about the event that has 300 people? Or one event that I did that had 45 people show up? I was disappointed. I had wanted at least 100 people to show up to this event. And I was just watching the photographer kind of go through the presentation and thinking, oh, this is just such a missed opportunity. And then at the end of the event, a young woman came up to me and the photographer and she said, I was just passing by the door. this was being held on a university campus. I saw that there was a slideshow going on. I thought I'd come in and see what was going on. If I got bored, I could leave. And I stayed for the whole presentation. Before I came in this room, I wasn't interested in conservation, and I certainly wasn't interested in this wild place in Alaska. But after seeing that presentation, I want to commit my life to this work. I want to go back to my dorm, and I want to convince everybody on my dorm floor that they should be involved with this work. So tell me what I can do next. And I mean, those are the moments that I live for. So how do you measure that? It's kind of a combination between accountability and quantity and quality, but I think that I would appreciate more of those conversations about how do you quantify that quality?
Yeah, I would really just echo what Helen said. For us, obviously, the measurement of success might be the winning a vote or having a special place protected. But there's many other ways to measure success in there. And I think Helen mentioned one of them, just bringing a lot of what we do is engaging the grassroots. So how are we measuring how we're getting more people engaged and inspired? And then I would just really echo your story about, you can measure that by sheer numbers, like how many people come to an event. But when I was out doing slideshows and when I talked to others about it, it is those smaller ones. You still want to do those because it might be that one person that becomes engaged in the community, or maybe you meet somebody. I did a slideshow in North Dakota, and I met the woman who was part of the Unitarian Church, where the senator from North Dakota, his brother was the minister of that church. So you meet these connections that you can't quantify, but like, there's 1,000 people there, but there was one really important person for the end result. So I think it's a mixture of both, and sometimes it's hard, I think, from our standpoint, when you're talking about the grassroots and engaging the public, it is hard to do those metrics in a meaningful way, and that comes back to the funding side of it as well.
The reason that Braided River exists is because we felt like it was an approach that wasn't being done by anyone else. And our approach to it is really taking a look at ways that we can curate the experience of taking people to a wild place that they might not be able to go to on their own, but that they can see through these visual images, and reinforcing it with stories that are not the same old, here's a whole bunch of photographs of clear cuts or seals being clubbed, which worked many decades ago. It doesn't work now. It's become much more difficult to craft these experiences in ways that touch people. There's also a lot more competition for people's attention and sympathies. And so our editorial team spends a great deal of time talking and researching ways to tell these stories in different ways from different perspectives. Each one of our books has the component of the history and the biology and Native communities and positive stories, how people are living sustainably within landscapes, how these conservation issues of wild places connect back to human beings. This was something that we did with Shabonker, and at the time there were people that said to us, we don't want to hear about people in landscapes, we want to just see this pristine beauty by itself. But it was clear to us, even in the early days, that unless you tell the human story, people aren't going to want to connect with this, and the likelihood of being able to protect it is even more difficult. So there's the strategy of the content development, and then the collaboration and extending all of this beyond the book. We definitely don't work just with trying to get the book into bookstores and selling it through Amazon. And our photographers know when the book is published, that's when real work begins. That's not when it ends. And these campaigns can go on for months and years. In a traditional book publishing model, it used to be that the publishers would maybe spend 6 months publicizing a book. If it caught on, great. If it didn't, move on to the next season. We don't do that with these books. In fact, in many instances, it takes us 6 months to 9 months even to get some momentum. You know, you talk to people and you tell them you're doing a book on the Tongass, and they say, where is that, in Indonesia? You think, you know, we've got a lot of work to do. So you don't have that 30 seconds when you can give the elevator pitch and hope it sticks. You have to stick to it.
Awesome. Well, I think we're out of time, but congratulations on an absolutely beautiful book.